So there's a lot of push for anti-transgender laws and anti-queer laws in general. So I think it's important to talk about the history of transgender people, of gender nonconforming people. And I also want to acknowledge before I go forward that I understand that these words are not necessarily interchangeable. But because I'm going to be talking about history, there is no word that I could broadly apply to what I'm talking about, right? Because these people didn't use English. They didn't have one broad word. We don't know much about certain cultures because of colonization. So some of these people could have been third gender. There are still third gender people throughout the world. Some of these people were simply gender nonconforming, and some people were trans or considered trans because, again, they didn't have that word. And since I am Anglophone myself, meaning that my ancestors were colonized by the English, and a lot of this is coming from the Harry Potter lady and a lot all around England. I think someone was ejected from Big Brother in England because of some transphobic comment. Let's focus on the Anglophone world. And we know there's countries like Uganda who have some of the strictest anti-gay laws in the world. And one of the excuses they like to use is that there was no queerness in Africa before the English came, before the colonizers came. However, throughout history, wherever the British went, they would create these anti-gay laws. They would see homosexuality, freak out, and create laws about it. If they did not observe homosexuality, they would not need to create laws about it. And these British people also wrote about what they saw. You can actually find interviews of them interviewing people in these societies. I mean, there are African people today who have passed on oral traditions of queerness within their societies, of gender nonconformity. So how queerness just sprung up in Africa out of nowhere, I don't know. But let's talk about Uganda first. So what we call Uganda today used to be a multitude of societies, a multitude of civilizations, a multitude of nations. Because you have to remember the British came, not the British, all of the Europeans came and just made up these countries that exist today. And also, please bear with me. I've tried to find a pronunciation of some of these words, but I couldn't. So in Langi society in Uganda, there were people called Mudoko Dako. These are people who were observed to be men dressed as women, according to the British, but they moved throughout their society as women. So again, I wouldn't call them men. They were sexed as males. Even in Sudan, there was a nation of people who had recognized a third gender. These people moved through societies as women, but the British observed them as males dressed as women. Amongst the Yoruba, it was observed that the differences between male and female are to be located in social practices, not biological fact. And amongst the Igbo, it was observed that if a family did not have a male child, they would turn their oldest daughter into their son, and that person would present themselves as men, and they would also marry women who would help take care of them. In India, there are people called the Hijra, and of course, during British colonization, the British outlawed them. But before British colonization, they were spiritual people. They were people who would take in children, orphan children, and they would take care of the community. The British came in and said, nope, illegal, and these people are pedophiles. And so it completely destroyed the social standing. And only recently, within the 2000s, have India officially recognized these people again. Third gender people can be found throughout the world, from Polynesia to North America to South America to even Europe within itself. The people have always existed. The question is, why did these laws come into place? When did we do like the little switch up? And a lot of that points to a social reason, which is that if you can have a certain group of people who control society, you can easily control society. So what the British would do is they would come to these countries, see that these countries were very diverse in their power structures and their social structures, but a diverse social structure is hard to colonize because you need to colonize an entire group of people. There's no one group that you can place into power because that person doesn't have power, right? So this is when cultures start to become very rigid, when patriarchal structures start to become what we call modern patriarchy. It becomes immutable, non-changing. So the British would come in and be like, oh, it's hard to control these people because there's so many different aspects to their society, so many different hierarchies, and it's just very hard to just grab one person and say, hey, tell these people what to do. So they would place younger men in power. These men, they were tricked into believing that they had no power, and that, hey, if you come and join our religion, if you come and join our side, only men have rights. Only men. You can take the land from the women, you can take it from the elders, children are your property, and boom, only this one group of people is in charge. And this is not to be all men, not all men thing. It's just to say that these men were manipulated. So they would give the men guns, they would give the men money. And if you're trying to empower men and you come from a strict society, especially a Christian world that had these laws against sodomy and all of this other nonsense, you can't have a woman who presents as a man in that space because the British didn't want to talk to women. You'll probably notice there's not a lot of transgender men history because the British didn't care to speak to whoever they perceived as women. They didn't care to really observe them, kind of just like the Greeks. Even though transgender men were in England,